Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to the Bite Size Evolver, excerpts from my podcasts. This just in, this morning's newspaper, and I thought it was really significant, a column by John McWhorter, and I've talked about John McWhorter before on the show. He's a new columnist to the New York Times. And John McWhorter comes out of, I've mistakenly referred to him as a conservative in the past, but he's not. He identifies himself as a classic liberal. And he just wrote a book that was a big bestseller called Woke Racism: How a New Religion Has Betrayed Black America. And in it, this is from the Google description, McWhorter argues that an illiberal neo-racism disguised as anti-racism is hurting Black communities and weakening the American social fabric. So John McWhorter, who is Black himself, he's off and on with Glenn Loury and a lot of these Black intellectuals that are coming from, even though he doesn't self-identify from the right, he's a hero, let me put it that way, to people on the right. So he's now been hired as a columnist for the New York Times. He is a linguist by profession. He is a professor at Columbia University. And he wrote an article today that was, I thought, surprising and very good, very persuasive to me. And it's called Gender Pronouns Are Changing. It's Exhilarating. And you can see they have a picture illustration of little Scrabble pieces with who, she, him, they, and on he goes with this article. And I will share from it, make a couple comments on what I think is the integral nature of him. And he's somebody I really like to pay attention to because he really can operate in several different worldviews at the same time. So here it is in praise of new pronouns. He writes, I also wanted to make the point that when I talk about this pronoun thing, this is a big flashpoint in the culture wars. And it was, in fact, the thing that kicked off Jordan Peterson as a public intellectual and the big, superstar he is in that firmament. And that was, I forget how many years ago, probably 4 or 5 now, where he refused as a professor at Toronto University to abide by a new amendment to the Canadian Human Rights Act to introduce, quote, gender identity and expression as a prohibited grounds of discrimination. And Peterson argued that would make use of certain, making use of certain pronouns was compelled speech, and he wouldn't do it, and that was his launching point. So, McWhorter's coming from a different point of view here, and even though they have a lot of the same fans. So here's what he wrote. He said, "The other day, I had occasion to use the pronoun they in the new way, referring to a specific person." And he uses the example, "Roberta wants a haircut, and they also want some highlights." I wrangled it, but it required a bit of conscious effort. Pronouns sit deep in our cognition, are used constantly, and bound by habit. I know some find it wearying. Why does language have to change all the time with all we have to think about? But we are not unique. There are times when the language firmament shifts under people's feet, and they get through it. And so he uses a number of examples. He talks about that in standard English, thou was the singular second person pronoun at one time. Then that fell away, and people started to use you for both singular and plural. He talked about the advent of Ms. in the 60s and 70s, how Black went to African American and is now back as long as you capitalize it. And, he pointed out that the problem here with they as a singular pronoun for a singular person is getting the subject verb agreement right. But he talks about how that was also, done and doable. And he mentions John and Abigail Adams, John Adams, of course, being founding father, Abigail, founding mother of the US. And that Abigail would write things like, I wish you was nearer to us. He talks about how people used to say, they wants to see you now, and that could be a solution. They wants to see you now. He writes, another guess is that there may be a call to differentiate singular they in writing by capitalizing it. Maybe that will catch on. Maybe not. But discussion will be as lively as the one in Sweden over the gender-neutral pronoun hen, H-E-N, which has dug in there for real. That's interesting. So he goes on, he says, you just never know how things are going to morph. Way back in Old English, the word for she was heo, H-E-O. And over time, that started to sound so much like he that in some dialects, you just said he for men and women. Were things going to stay that way, given that a great many languages have gender-neutral pronouns of that kind? One may have wondered. But instead, English developed a new pronoun. Possibly it was by yanking a new feminine pronoun from a word that meant that, used with nouns of feminine gender. Or possibly it was something mysterious that arose in England and Scotland. Theories are various, but the result was a new pronoun, she. And most likely, some people at first didn't like it. They died, and here we are. I love that. They died, and here we are. And yeah, it's, progress precedes funeral by funeral. And I realized that for me, I'm 67 and a half. I don't know if I'm going to be able to wrap my head around this. I'm not sure I'm going to necessarily need to. But it does point to evolution as a continual unfolding of complexity. And that those grooves that McWhorter is talking about at the beginning of the article, the pronoun grooves are very deep in a guy like me, But for younger people, they have a complexity of mind that they can handle it. They'll figure it out. And the move in culture is, as McWhorter says here, it's first of all, it's inevitable, but it's also well worth it for a reason he doesn't really mention. And that is that as we evolve, and particularly as we move the mainstream more into a more fluorescent green, there's a deep subjectivity that comes online. We really want to be seen for who we are. We want to express who we are. Everybody gets to do that. That's not really a modern sensibility, but it's a postmodern sensibility, a progressive sensibility. No repression on basic identity. And this is good. People are going to be all kinds of which ways. And the roles and stereotypes and rigid categories will continue to complexify. And that is, welcome to the march of progress. And one of the reasons why we only get a lifespan and then we have to die, because at some point we just can't keep up with this stuff. And I think I may be in that. So anyway, I wanted to point that out and also to get into this piece that McWhorter didn't, which is this idea of seeing people for who they are and in these gender fluid ways. People are far more gender fluid than we were taught that they were, even though we knew when we were kids. I was a gay kid in the Steel Valley of Western Pennsylvania in my teenage years in the 70s. And I knew I couldn't be who I was. And there were other kids in my class that you could see they had a harder time hiding it. And they paid the price. And if only there had been a way, forward, and there is now. And the New York Times is very much behind this. And I wanted to share another article that they had. This was in the Sunday New York Times Magazine a couple weeks ago. And it's from an article on this camp that was started called Camp I Am. And I found the online version, and I'm going to share it. And it's about these kids who are, don't fit into the typical categories. And so it starts with, my story is so atypical for trans people. I know very few people who express their gender the same way I do. At camp, it was just me being me. And then I'll read this. 14 years ago, the mother of a gender non-conforming son organized a summer camp of sorts where her child and others like him could wear frilly pastel nightgowns and tend to their My Little Ponies together. Only 3 other families showed up at that first summer, but the camp grew quickly. It was called Camp I Am. In 2008, the photographer Lindsay Morris took her son there and began taking pictures of some of his fellow campers. More than a decade later, she asked many of them to be photographed again as they entered adulthood. So this is like a photo essay here, and I'll just scroll through it because I know most of you are watching on YouTube. And this is Hannah, who was assigned male at birth, and she is 18, and she tells her story, and here's pictures of her when she was young at camp, performing at camp, other picture of her now. So you can see that this is a girl by any, maybe not by any definition, but certainly presents that way. Same here with Nicole, 19, and when she was a little girl, again, assigned male at birth. Elias, who is male, he just likes he would be called, oh, this is so quaint, and kind of, he'd be a transvestite. He's a boy who likes to dress up as a girl. And he always did, and he still does, and he's a designer now, and look at him, he's fabulous. And Ryan, he, keeps the male name. It's all various different which ways, and you can see that Ryan certainly presents as a female now, Danny, and on and on and on. There's several of them, look at them. So, the New York Times is very much behind presenting this cultural way forward so that people can express themselves in all the various which ways that they want to, in ways that are fluid, that may be this way this year and another way another year. And again, this is very disorienting to people my age, even though I'm gay, I was disorienting to people back in, my day, earlier days. So, again, welcome to human evolution. What the New York Times hasn't covered that I've seen, and perhaps they have, but there's of course a lot of controversy around this gender fluidity. It's not particularly welcome in modern sensibilities. It's seen as a great evil, really, in traditional circles, and we see that in various countries with the center of gravity traditionalism. We see that in the Taliban. We'll see if they start executing gays again. I guess there has been some of that. But in the developed countries, this is a move that's happening. The fuller story would include, and this is what I'm not sure I've seen the New York Times cover, is the detrans movement. The movement, you see it on Reddit. There's several big communities there of people who have transitioned and now they want to transition back. This actually will probably be more and more acceptable. But of course, a lot of them have surgeries. A lot of them have delayed puberty. And there's consequences to that. And there's an ideology around letting everybody be who they are that has itself become oppressive. And again, welcome to the culture wars. But a bigger story would include that. But I can't critique this story for that reason, because not every story can cover every issue. And when you see these stories here in this Camp I Am, you can see that, thank God, that's a girl. Thank God that there's a path for that little born as a boy to be the girl that she feels she is on the inside. And there doesn't seem to be much regret in these kids. So again, we're just figuring this out, people. I'm very happy that John McWhorter threw his weight as a linguist around the pronouns. I think it's a really sort of an interesting move in the whole New York Times kind of territory.